Hello, everybody. Can you all see me? I see some people in the chat already. Ron, Comrade Jeb, Wingless Monkey, 255. Ah, boy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Monday stream. So, to give you guys a rundown, if this is anyone's first time in here, please let yourself be known in the comments. I would be very happy to know that. I'd like to know who's in here and who's new. On top of that, this is a stream I do on Monday afternoons, basically as a way to hang out with y'all in the hour before a new Quickstep comes out, which will be happening at 2 o'clock Eastern. I'm sorry I was a little bit late today. I was nervous. I was writing an email. So to give you guys a little bit of a rundown, I'm working on making my videos a little bit more polished and cinematic and fun. And you might have seen a little bit of that with the 1812 video, which people seem to really like. But I'm going to be doing even more of that and trying to get the process so that I'm like working on bigger projects. And I'm getting like maybe recklessly ambitious, but I had to send an email today that was, I can't say too much about who I was sending an email to, because I don't want to give anyone's hopes up, but the name of the person I was sending the email to, I was just like, I can't believe I'm actually sending an email to this person. And I was just like, okay. I had to put down all of my nervousness and just be like, all right, time to sit down and write an actual email to this person. And I had to just be like professional and not like just be like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. So that's for a video that's coming out in July. So we'll see where that goes. I think that most of you would probably be surprised by who it is, or you might not know because they are associated with a particular community. So that's a thing. Oh man, what a life. So yeah, this show that I do is where I just kind of just be a little bit more chill and hang out with y'all before a new video comes out. I already have one question. Joe Biden, quote, voted in favor of well-formed block grants and supported welfare reform. Is that good or bad? The block grants I think is good, but welfare reform is not. Welfare reform was basically a third way New Democrat initiative, which was basically to, as welfare reform said, quote unquote, destroy welfare reform as we know it, or end welfare reform as we know it. It's basically the status that welfare is in right now, and that's why it's really hard to get, and so many people live in such rough situations. That would have been... it was a 90s thing to try and get the most hardcore, or get the most, kind of show that the Democrats have moved to the right. So that was, that's basically it. Whew. Girthax wants to know if I have thoughts on the YouTuber Vaush. I do not know who that is. Comrade Ace, thoughts on the Communist Party of Canada and Clara Sorrenti? Clara Sorrenti sounds like a familiar name, but I do not know who that is. The Communist Party of Canada, I have dealt with them. They're a Marxist-Leninist party in Canada. They're very old. I think now that the Conservatives had the merger in 2003, that the Communist Party of Canada might be like the second oldest party in the country next to the Liberals, something in that range. They're a very old guard party. They're not really making much efforts or inroads to get electoral victories, but they're pretty good at organizing protests. I, at one point, was considering membership in it, but then I realized a handful of things, which is one, if I had joined the Communist Party of Canada, one, it would be supporting Marxism-Leninism, which I have doctrinal disagreements with. Two, I don't think it would be very good for electoral success. I don't really see the Communist Party of Canada really making positive change as much as, say, actively agitating for a more mainstream party to get into to make changes at the moment. And third, if you have an official membership in a Marxist-Leninist party or a communist party in general, that actually can end up on a record that could do damage to you. Part of with my wife, my wife is from the United States, and it's not a thing that we have planned to do, but if we ever needed to move to the United States, you actually have to declare whether or not you've been associated with a communist party when you immigrate. And I would have to say yes, and that would cause problems. And so all those things have kind of kept me from really wanting to solidify my membership. So that's basically all the things. Did you see the poll maps I put on Discord? If not, Biden is polling more states than Sanders. Yeah, that is true. Biden, so the thing is right now, I'm a little bit a little bit lukewarm on how Biden's doing, or how well, congratulations, Ace, on coming out as bi. That's awesome. So yeah, Biden looks like he's ahead right now. He's beaten Sanders for day one fundraising. That is a pretty standard thing, but I will say a couple things to that, and that is Joe Biden has run for president 4 times at this point. This is his 4th run for the presidency, and every single time he looks like he's doing all right, and then he has a habit of saying terrible things that basically result in him losing his bid. And I could see that happening again, especially because I think it's coming out pretty quickly after his announcement that he's got lots of sort of baggage from his long career in Congress that are hurting him. And so I don't see a long-term solution. I don't see him having long-term success, especially once we get into the debates. Because right now, the success or failure, of a candidate is based on name recognition and fundraising, which is basically where people are right now. But the race will really shape up when 2 events happen. The first debate, which is scheduled for July, and the first actual primary, or the first actual caucus, which is the Iowa caucus, which will be in February of 2020. So both of those things are going to be big watershed moments for the Democrat, or for who's actually going to be involved in the race. At the moment, though, it's all kind of just isn't Sanders breaking breaking records in terms of fundraising? Yes, he is. Sanders is there's a lot of discussions about how Sanders has been spending the last 4 years developing his second run for the presidency, has a strong and well-organized, on-the-ground, grassroots organization that is, literally they just designed an apps to build a, grassroots organization called Burn, where you can actually, when you have conversations with random people and friends and stuff like that, you can write down what issues they care about through the conversation and their name, and sort of it'll trace it back to the voting record to sort of put them into the Sanders campaigning machine, and all that stuff. That's some really good campaign organization, and using an app is actually really clever, because most of the time that is that's typically called canvassing, and it's typically done in these very specific events where you go door to door with a clipboard and people usually just, shut the door in your face. But in this case, you can like canvas just by having conversations with your friends or with your family and gauge who's interested and try to see if you can nudge anybody closer. So that is very good election planning, and also the high amount of regular donors combined with a strong volunteer base, where Sanders over the weekend did over 3,000 launch events across the world. There was actually one in Toronto. I didn't go because it said it was for Americans only, but still, that all shows that Sanders probably has the most coherent election machine on the ground right now, and I do think that would be interesting to discuss. And I do think that Sanders is going to look better, and a lot of other people are going to look worse once they get to the debates. There's 20 people, so the people who don't even get into the debates will likely be eliminated pretty quick. I don't know if the Democrats are going to do like the kids' table debate like they tried to do, like the Republicans tried to do when they had a crowded field. I really hope not. But on top of that, so I think that like after the first debate, you're going to see a lot of people drop out, and then when you get down to to the end, you'll be like, yeah, it's going to become clear pretty fast that it's going to be Sanders versus everybody else, which in a very fractured field, I think will give him a lot of leeway. And there's a lot of people who are right now, while Democratic candidates know there's not a ton of attention being paid to them, they're saying very, very progressive things and basically anything anybody wants to hear. And that's fine for the moment right now, but once people start paying attention, they're going to start becoming more right-wing and more conservative. And in my mind, that's when like a lot of these candidates like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris are going to start to lose a lot of their support. Okay, I watched a clip of Noam Chomsky where he said, aside from information technology, which he describes as thrills, progress largely stopped in 1970. What would you say to that? I mean, it's a bit reductionist. I don't even know what his definition of progress would be. Like, as far as technological progress, like we have gone light years as far as developing information technology, data analytics, and other things like that. But the problem is that once I think what he's talking about is that since the 70s and neoliberalism has set in, there's been less emphasis on funding basic research and funding like things that might be important but not necessarily profitable, and that has stopped almost entirely. Things like what's it called? Things like antibiotics are like the whole antibiotics resistance crisis that everyone's talking about is actually not about. It's not about us running out of antibiotics, but us not researching more because it's not profitable. So that's kind of like an example, and like there's not much research being put into improving battery technology because electric cars are being, are not as profitable as gas cars, and so yeah, once we've started to emphasize the market and capitalism and everything, we've stopped innovating, which sounds counterintuitive for a lot of capitalist apologetics, but it is actually how the world works, and once you have that capitalism actually stifles innovation. So, Ina asks, who's your favorite of the Diadochi, successors of Alexander the Great? I don't know any but Ptolemy, so I guess I'll go with Ptolemy, if he even counts. There are two Marxist-Leninist parties in Canada. I know there's the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada and the Communist Party of Canada, which just shows how much the left really needs to get their shit together sometimes. Why are welfare block grants good? I actually do not know too much about the details of that, but I've heard about block grants being used for positive things, but I don't have the details. Whoa. Alright, we have a cat. Hey, Phoebe. Everyone likes Phoebes. Phoebe is the real reason why people come to this stream. We all know this. Okay. You took an exam in class an hour ago. I'm going to fail because I don't understand the material, but watching your bad grades does not equal being stupid for it, and it made me feel better. Well, you know what? I'm sorry that happened to you, Doughboy DeVito. Time only goes forward, and so I have a lot of trust for you. You know, I dropped out of a PhD about a year ago, and I somehow survived. Okay. In which case, how high are Bernie's chances? Also, if elected, does he have the grassroots/Congress people candidates to support him? I like Sanders' chances. I think that the way that the political winds have been moving in the last 4 years heavily favor his candidacy. I think if he makes promises of choosing a solid, young woman, possibly even woman of color candidate, that he's going to get a lot of base support from millennials and Gen Zers who are Democrats. I don't see any of the other candidates being able to go as far to promise the things that a lot of Gen Z and millennials want, and they are now the majority of the base. So, in my mind, Sanders is a extremely good contender. He is my betting person. My betting line is that he's going to walk away with it. Biden is a threat, but I don't see Biden having the longevity. He kind of doesn't stop saying terrible things. And so once you get through it, it'll happen. But even that being said, we can't get comfortable. We got to do everything we can. Did you know many white British people's DNA can be traced back to the Egyptians? I did not know that. I don't know anything about that. Okay. Did you ever get a gun pulled on you while canvassing? No. Oh, you're talking to Glitch42. Have you ever played Kaiserreich? No. I have barely even played Hearts of Iron 4. I don't really know much about Kaiserreich except that I've had to ban tons of people from our Discord for basically having borderline fascist memes based on Kaiserreich, on massacring all of the syndicalists or whatever. It doesn't sound. I'm sure many of you know this. I don't super find World War II era stuff all that interesting, and so Kaiserreich doesn't really appeal much to me. I know it's got so much more diversity in the left, but still, it's still just the world wars and Europe are just whatever to me. That period is just I'm very much more interested in post-World War II history, to be honest. Why would people run and get all the money just to drop out halfway? Well, Christos, the reason why is because running for president, as we learn, thing about Trump. So, okay, here's the thing. This is why there's 20 people running for president, and they're raising a bunch of money, even knowing that they're going to drop out. Even people like Cory Booker, who are running for president and raising money, but also campaigning for their Senate seat still. It is because it's because in the past, pre-2016, there was considered when you ran for president, you were making a huge gamble. And that if you lost, you'd be out a ton of money and your reputation would be ruined forever. You would never be able to run for president again. Trump Trump was basically running just to secure himself a deal. And the thing is that getting to running for president and not winning has a lot of benefits. Sometimes it sets you up for a future run. For example, like it gets you instant access to a national audience and a ton of media attention. So if you're Cory Booker, who's a relatively young senator, you run for president, you don't do well, but you get a lot of attention, you got a lot of people paying attention to you. You run again in like 4 or 8 years, and you have a much higher chance of winning the primaries because they already have that name recognition. And name recognition is really the name of the game when it comes to American politics. On top of that, with your access to a media audience and your access to the national attention, you can leverage that for other gigs. Sarah Palin leveraged it to get Fox News shows and things like that. So there's a lot that you can do. You can also use it, say, if you do well in the primaries, you might use it to get yourself a nice position if, say, like a Democrat won, like if you run for president and you do well in the primaries and then that other person becomes president, they might consider you as somebody with high brand recognition and with a dedicated following to be part of their cabinet. Look how many former Republican, look how many Republicans who ran against Trump are now running departments and things like that. And so these are all, there are many, many different reasons to run for president, and being president isn't all of them. Does it make any sense that all the typical Democrat neolibs will cancel themselves out at the first primaries and give Bernie an advantage? Yes. In the Democratic Party right now, you have a very split right. You have, like, one centrist candidate with Elizabeth Warren, you have one left-wing candidate with Bernie Sanders, and then you have 18 right-wing candidates. So, with that down, like, that shows that the field is far too, like, the right is extremely split. And so, I would not be surprised that if there are still this many people by February, which I doubt, after like the first couple debates, there's going to be some people who drop out, a lot of people who drop out. You could definitely see like say if like Kamala Harris and say if we get to February and Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Biden and Sanders are the 4 candidates left. You've got 3 right-wing candidates and 1 left-wing candidate in a time when the Democratic Party is moving very far to the left. The base, anyway. And yeah, you would see all the right-wing candidates split between all of their different flavors of neoliberalism, but then you would have Sanders getting supported. So there you go. Tristan, shouldn't we be more advanced than we already are? Yeah, probably. Capitalism has sort of held us back quite a bit. For like that split thing, this is something that doesn't happen much in America, but it happens a lot in parliamentary democracies like Canada, where Canada has one centrist party, one left-wing party, and one right-wing party. But what happens is that because of strategic voting, a lot of people vote for the centrist party, and you end up in a lot of situations in which you have the conservative, the right-wing candidate, getting elected because they had more votes than the combined of the Liberal and New Democrat, which are the 2 parties I was talking about. The Liberal and the New Democrat parties combined. And so like they could have 34% of the popular vote, and that would get them the whole seat. And this is what's going. But the thing is, imagine that 34% is like a split. Like it's a split. We have a split left in Canada, but like in America with the Democratic primaries, it's a split right. And the thing is, on top of there being a split right, there's definitely more interest in a left-wing candidate in the Democrats right now. All right. I'm betting the Democratic primaries will be about Biden, Sanders, Harris, and Beto, and maybe Buttigieg. Buttigieg's already kind of like he's after he like said that he doesn't think prisoners should vote, he's already kind of lost his gas. He had his moment in the spotlight when CNN was trying to desperately make him the not Sanders, because right now the corporate media is trying to find any candidate who they can prop up as the sort of enemy of Sanders, the hero of the story in their eyes, who will defeat the evil leftists, but they haven't been able to find one who sticks yet. Biden is now the one they got, but he's not going to last long. He seemed to be talking about quality of life type stuff like you mentioned, door plumbing. I think I missed. Okay. Things like funding for humanities and universities. Yep, I know that feeling. Mike Gravel, who is running as an 88-year-old Alaskan senator, is a Democratic Socialist. He even stated so. Yes, he is running. He is also an example of someone who's not running to actually become president, but he's running to elevate an anti-imperialist message in the Democratic debates. That's basically his entire point of running. Burqa bans tell Muslims their religion and welcome. Does Iceland's circumcision ban do the same thing, i.e. even though infant circumcision is bad regardless? That's not really a thing people can consent to when they're babies, so I mean, I don't really know how to stick to get into Iceland's circumcision ban, but it does seem like one is clothing and one is a surgical procedure, and so I feel like we're talking about very different things at that point. What are some features of old leftist movements like the civil rights movement from the 60s that was positive and is missing from the current day leftist movements of a similar nature? That the people who are involved get out and do stuff. Like, the thing about the 60s counterculture and like the civil rights movement is that it was very all-encompassing. If you were a civil rights activist, it wasn't just a thing you did on the weekends. Like, civil rights activists like lived and breathed civil rights work. And here, I'm gonna move the camera down because I know you guys want to see Kitty. Even though the microphone, just move the microphone a little bit. So, the thing is, like, civil rights and like leftist work back in the 60s was very much like your entire social life. All of your friends were activists. You were always at events, and you sort of like lived together, played together, like traveled together, and all sorts of stuff like that. And today, we're a lot more. Ever since the 60s, we've become a lot more isolated and separated from each other, and we kind of are a lot less social, to the point where like a lot of Zoomers are like literally developing social anxiety and fear of going out in public because we've become so atomized and isolated from each other. That is just terrifying, and that makes it really hard to organize a left-wing resistance to capitalism. So it's almost as if there's a problem there. Does Kitty is purring? She is not purring right now, but also when she purrs, she's kind of quiet. So, but she's definitely having a nice, relaxing time. Okay. Tristan, have you heard of Tesla's free energy invention that was supposedly suppressed by oil companies, or is that a myth created by conspiracy theorists? It was a myth created by Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla is... Nikola Tesla, when he had a lot of his life ruined, and so in his last couple years he retreated and isolated himself, and that's when he was like that's when he started like saying, oh, I invented like death rays and things like that, and like wireless power and all this kind of stuff. And so like Tesla had an unstable last few years of his life, and that's when he like proposed that he made free energy. But free energy by like physics definition is impossible. The thing, though, is that there's a lot of energy available to us that doesn't have to come from hydrocarbons. There's light there's wind, there's like nuclear forces, there's the lava in the earth. Like there's all sorts of ways we can get energy that don't involve destroying the ecosystem, and that's the thing that we should probably go with. Honestly, the big bottleneck is we need to develop battery technology, and we've been making breakthroughs on that because of cell phone development. So if we can get to some point where we can get lightweight batteries that can hold a lot of charge, you're going to start seeing a lot of sci-fi technologies that we thought were a long way off becoming pretty mainstream. Okay. 2020 will see the first Zoomer voters. How do you think Zoomers will affect the politics of Canada and other places? I think that Zoomer voters, so Gen Z, there's not a ton of research done on the politics of Gen Z at the moment. Let me just, here we go. But they are, Kitty looks pissed. Yeah, she has the cat version of like resting bitchy face. That's just kind of how she is. She always looks like she's mad, but she's fine. The whole Zoomer thing, I think, is that Zoomers they've grown up in a very different context, so you have to keep in mind that they are the ones who grew up, spent their formative childhood years in the Depression, in the like Great Recession period. On top of that, Zoomers sort of grew up with the radicalization of politics that started happening with things like Gamergate, and have kind of pushed people away from like liberal centrism as like the political model, which is something that millennials stick to a lot more. And so I do think that the Zoomers are a lot more radical, either left or right, than their parents and the millennials before them. So like when it comes to millennials, so wait, what are the Zoomers? Zoomers are people who were born after 1998 or after 2000, depending on your definition. So people born in the 21st century are Zoomers, technically. And they are, so like Gen Z are, they seem to have become radicalized, but also on top of that, it's hard for them to organize because, as I said, Zoomers have had a much more atomized existence, and so there's like lots of studies that come out that show that Zoomers have they've had less time socializing than millennials or anybody before. Like I think it was shown that like on average, Zoomers actually spend drastically less time with other people in person than others, which is showing like there's actually like a degrading of like social skills and rising in social anxiety and like a fear of things like relationships and sex and stuff that that is picking up a lot more with the younger generation, which millennials did to a little bit, but Zoomers have gone a lot more into that. And that is the thing that's going to need to be overcome if we're going to, because those are pathological to resisting capitalism. And so there's like a distinct loss of community, and that has resulted in, it seems, is a distinct loss of empathy for other people. Zoomers have studied to have some of the lowest empathy among generations. The less compassion for others, less like more being more numb to acts of cruelty against perceived others, things like that, which has led to like the rise of fascism amongst them. All right, I think she's done. And so that those are scary things, and I mean I'm not putting judgments on Zoomers. These are all generalizations and tendencies, and we can work them through. She has decided that she wants to go look out the window for a while. So she's just down there. Plus, there's Romeo in the back there. I don't know if you noticed. He's just kind of sleeping. So basically, perfect workers for capitalists. Unfortunately, yes, but also perfect for online lynch mobs because while Zoomers don't do much person-to-person communication, they have gotten a lot more. They have gotten a lot more into online communities, and have become like they're very prone to being targeted and being absorbed by hate groups. Sees the streams, taste for Tristan's cat. Thank you, Robin Peterson, for the $2 super chat. I really appreciate it. This is the kind of stuff that makes Step Back function. I'm trying to go full time, and that $2 was one little way. There you go. Look, you got a little zombie. And so yeah, the online hate mobs and stuff like that are stuff that I'm really worried about when it comes to what is this Gen Z dynamic. I hope that I know there's a lot of you in the chat. I hope you don't think that this is me trying as a millennial trying to talk shit about Zoomers. It's just how much do you need a month to go full time? At the moment, I would need to. If that is a serious inquiry, we would need to talk off screen. I don't really want to talk about my personal finances on the stream, but yeah, I'm currently, for a rough estimate, I think this month I'll be about maybe 55-60% towards where I need to go. All right. Do you think that there should be a law in the U.S. where if you run for president, you can be in office for your term or any office by the end of the term you were inaugurated? Wait, okay. Do you think that there should be a law in the U.S. where if you run for president, you can be in office or your term on any office has to end by the time you're inaugurated? That's typically the case. Nobody is going to be, no one's going to be both, in my mind. You usually, are you trying to say that if you run for president, you shouldn't also campaign for your Senate seat? Because yeah, that is, that would be a little, I would argue that should be the case, but you shouldn't be able to campaign for two political offices at the same time. But here we are. It's another one of those negative side effects of the fact that the political parties are considered private institutions, while running for office is considered a public institution. Ah, that's better. Okay. You can't run for president if you're right in the middle of a term like Harris is 3 out of 6 years into being a senator. I mean, that's not bad. I don't think that's a problem, actually, Comrade Jeb. Because, yeah, you can, because when you resign, you then trigger a by-election. And then people can vote. So I think that's, yeah. I know that you guys reported him. I'm sorry I was slow. I just, what's it called? I don't have any of my moderators here, so I had to take care. I had to keep. It's hard to talk and moderate chat at the same time. How watered down do you think the Fourth Amendment is? Well, the Patriot Act pretty much just doesn't make it a thing anymore, because you can just say terrorism and all of a sudden the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply, so it really has no teeth anymore. My grandfather is in hospital for knee surgery. Apparently he's worried some of the staff aren't qualified because they're people of color. Is there any point trying to convince old people not to be racist? I mean, yeah, I do think that you have to realize that it's not really much of like a logical argument. It's definitely an emotional one, and one that they have to sort of like. The thing about convincing people of like how to like undoing racism and undoing sexist ideas and stuff like that typically come from multiple sustained interactions over a long period of time, and on top of that, appealing to things besides logic, their emotions, and talking about the unfairness and the injustice of things. That typically will be a little bit more compelling. But then again, it also takes time and exposure. Maybe, maybe once your grandfather's surgery happens and it turns out that these people of color can do medical stuff just fine, maybe that'll change his tune just a little bit. Who knows? But yeah, sometimes it's difficult, and some people, not everybody's going to be convinced, but it's still worth trying. It's always worth trying. I am a sucker for redemption stories, and I think everyone can be redeemed. All right, I've heard that Julian Castro is good on immigration, and Jay Inslee is good on the environment. Is this true, and are they good for other policy matters? Well, yeah, Julian Castro is the big person for immigration. I would still say he's not good enough on immigration. I don't think any of the candidates, Sanders included, are good on immigration. The U.S. should not have. I mean, we should just get rid of borders. That's the thing. But there you go. But Julian Castro definitely has made immigration the focal point of his campaign. And if I remember, Jay Inslee is doing the same with climate change legislation. Inslee might not be bad. If Sanders falls, Inslee might be on the higher end of my list, but I think that I would probably still put Elizabeth Warren ahead of him. Okay. Also, what's up with Tulsi Gabbard? I either hear she's great or terrible, depending upon which leftist you listen to. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about Tulsi Gabbard. In my mind, I actually think that she's still a pretty good candidate to be Sanders' vice president. So the thing about her, here's the things that make her good. One, she is solidly left-wing on a lot of things. She was a DCCC like high up person, a representative from Hawaii, and then she dropped out of she resigned from her position to campaign for Sanders. She is she's young, she's a veteran, she is on the Foreign Policy Committee. All of these things would be a really big boon for Sanders as a vice presidential candidate, because she is basically strong in every place where he is weak. She's an insider, she's young, she's a person of color, she's friggin' got a lot of foreign policy experience, all of those things. The bad sides of her is that she has come to being progressive on some issues very, very late in the game. It's on record that she was fairly homophobic until very recently, basically until it was politically convenient. And she has a history with Hindu nationalist groups in India that is not good. So those two things are like legit concerns, and that's why I wouldn't want her to be president. But the other things, like, she's a mixed bag. She's definitely a complicated candidate. But yeah, depending upon how much emphasis you put on those things and how much you believe some of those things, depends upon how much you're really into Tulsi Gabbard or not. All right. Do you think isolation, etc., in activist spaces could be caused in part by mass systemic crushing of social activism in general? Yes. There has been more and more violent responses to protest in general in the last like 30, 40 years. On top of that, much more development, or on top of that, there has also been a sort of capitalist like colonization of all of your free time, and a lot more emphasis on like it's a lot more difficult to get work now, and so being involved in activist situations can tarnish your work reputation. I would actually recommend watching Thought Slime's most recent video on fun. It actually gets to this issue of why activism hasn't been all that done a lot. So watch that. That's a pretty good one. I'm not saying the two things are comparable. I'm saying I worry banning circumcision might be used to prosecute Muslims or Jews under the pretext of defending infant bodies. I mean, yes, that is definitely the case. But trust me, like, I don't know if you know much about Iceland and immigration, but Iceland is like one of the hardest countries on the planet to immigrate to. It's virtually impossible. And it is one of the most genetically homogenous societies on Earth, to the point where, like, I mean, it was a prank, but the whole, like, there was a prank app made to see whether or not someone you were dating was related to you. But Iceland goes through some pretty harsh and things that I would say are pretty damn racist to preserve Iceland as an ethno state, as Gerthak says. So this like ban on circumcision, I think, is just is one of the least ways that Iceland goes to make non-Icelandic people feel uncomfortable. Yeah, so like, it's the least of Iceland's issues. If that was passed in like France, then definitely I would be a lot more concerned. But then I also am concerned about the bodily autonomy of children, so I don't know. That's a difficult question. Which candidate is the cop? That's Kamala Harris. She was the state prosecutor for California for many years, and was behind a lot of like military-industrial complex stuff when she was state prosecutor for California. Leftists across Europe and America are pushing for social democracy to come back. How long have we got until technological development means even that hamstrung version of capitalism untenable? I would say we're at that now, but you know, again, it's like a better and best situation. We're never going to have, like, capitalism is it's basically a machine that's designed to destroy itself, and there's never been a time where capitalism was a tenable ideology that we could manage. And any social democracy that tries to actually live up to its ideals would quickly start to become more and more communist in order to, try to even get the semblance. Otherwise, or they're just doing it in name only. So I feel like there's like they wouldn't be able to keep themselves together on the long term. Even though I would still support social democracy because it is still way better than what we got now. Okay. Isn't less empathy super anti-leftist? Yes. This is why you see a big rise in the radical right in the Zoomer generation, because there is a strong, like, there is like a strongly lacking sense of empathy for other people, which is one of the most disturbing trends I've seen on the internet and in the kind of younger generation, and that makes me sad. How do you think education would operate in an anarchist world? It would last your whole life. See you later, Logan. Education in an anarchist society would be fun, casual, and it would last your whole life. Your mom is a respectable woman. How is she? Tell her that your audience says hi. I will. She is okay, I guess. I saw her last on Easter, and she seemed fine. They're kind of, they're old people. My mom is probably getting ready to retire in like 3 or 4 years, and so that's basically the big thing that's up. All of the kids, or all of the pets in my parents' house are now dead, and so it's really just her and my dad and my sister, and it just goes. They're getting ready to retire. That's basically the main thing. In which case should we encourage ethnic, racial / religious quotas in housing like Singapore does? It allows for sustained contact but may have tensions in the short term. I think it should always be done. I think that it creates that constant connection. Integration of schools was a good idea. What do they call it in Britain? Positive discrimination, or affirmative action, as it's called, I think in America. All of those are good things. All of those are good things. We should do them. Because, one of the big things for tackling prejudice and discrimination is contact. And we need to desegregate various domains of life. Okay. What do you think about the results of the election in Spain? I actually don't know anything about it. Can I get my hands on a Bernie button as a Canadian, like the one you have? Yes. My wife got this for me. This, I bought this in 2015, and it is, I bought it off Etsy, I want to say. And that's the Bernie Sanders action figure. So, yeah, you can. When it comes to, like, official Bernie Sanders campaign merchandise, I have an official Bernie Sanders 2016 election t-shirt that I wear regularly. That one you will not be able to have shipped to Canada. You can only ship it to the United States. And so how I got that shirt is I had it delivered to my in-laws, and then I picked it up at Christmas time. Hey, you didn't answer my question. What comes after anarchy? I don't know what comes after anarchy. Does anything have to come after anarchy? Fully automated luxury gay space communism? That comes after anarchy. And it's good. Was Occupy Wall Street the most influential political movement on the modern day left? I definitely think that in the full scope of time, like right now, the narrative is that Occupy Wall Street was a failure. But in my mind, it opened up left-wing activism and opened up the discussion about class in America in a way that never had happened before, or hasn't happened in a very long time. And in my mind, that we are going to look back when Sanders is elected president, which I hope will happen next year. I think we're going to look back on Occupy Wall Street as something a little bit more significant than it actually was, or that a little bit more significant than we do now. But that happens with history sometimes. Sometimes things that look like they were flash in the pan events turn out to be more significant in the full scope of time. I thought you said transitioning from social democracy to communism is impossible. I don't think I've ever said that. What's the difference between a social democrat and a liberal? A liberal believes in capitalism, and a social democrat believes... Basically, it's whether or not you believe capitalism is a positive or a negative. A social democrat would say that capitalism needs to be heavily controlled and basically is more interested in policies about managing the economy and making things more egalitarian, while a liberal is more focused on positive freedoms and... the right to do this and the right to do that, and about free markets and capitalism and seeing it as a positive good, and that whether or not something makes money is the definition of whether or not it is good. Things like that. How would we phase out money? That would be a process of simply, it would be different in different places, but I imagine it would be a matter of moving away from like buying things from stores. Like, in my mind, if the move towards anarchism that I see as the way forward, it would be a transition of us kind of withdrawing from the economy and moving towards an informal economy that's not based on exchanging money. And eventually, we would just have this is like a store that functions without people giving them cash. I feel like it would just sort of decay over time, I guess is the answer. Hey, weird question. Have you ever seen a movie called Akira? And do you have any suggestions for anarchist media, books, TV, shows, and films? Well, Ron, yes, I have seen Akira. It is a good movie. If you're talking about the anime movie from the 80s, where there's motorcycles and psychic children, and then the biggest body horror film moment, I think, in history, where the guy absorbs his girlfriend and starts just turning into a giant flesh blob that takes over the city. Yeah. I thought Akira was a good movie. As far as anarchist media, books, TV shows, and film, La Conquête de Pain or The Conquest of Bread is a classic. That's more philosophy. I'm thinking you're wanting something a bit more narrative. And I actually... Nothing by Robert Heinlein, that's for sure. Anarchist. Star Trek. Star Trek has a lot. No, maybe not. It's not really anarchist, it's more just socialist. The Culture series, maybe? I haven't read it, so I can't really vouch for that. Yeah, Mad Max Fury Road. That's actually a pretty good one. Yeah, let's go with that. Mad Max Fury Road is actually a really, really good piece of anarchist sort of fiction. Benefits aside, forcing people to live in integrated communities seems kind of anti-freedom. It really depends. If it's in the process, the thing is if that's in the process of allowing for more freedoms for people of color who have been, whom prejudice and systemic oppression is keeping them from the benefits of society, then who's to say? All right, we've got 1 minute left, so I got to move fast for these last ones. Would a transition to money involve some sort of decentralized worker exchange, like Amazon and town markets, but for free? Sure. I'm sure that we'd have to try out all sorts of stuff and figure out what works. We would need to experiment first. I'm sure we don't have an answer right now, but we need to work on that because we can't survive the way things are going. What is that book about Walmart socialism called? It's called The People's Republic of Walmart. Remember, anarchism is non-authoritarian nature, correct? Yes. Would you like fingers for toes? No, because I am not part of that. What was that anime show that people had? Anyways, 2 o'clock is upon us now. So, the new video is out. Here is a link, friends. I will see you guys. If anyone wants to come out for tomorrow night, I have Step Back Tonight tomorrow night, so look forward to that. See y'all later, and enjoy the new video. See ya.